You're probably wondering, how can this be? None of this seems right. None of this seems fair. And it definitely doesn't seem democratic. You're right. The reason our founding fathers worked so hard to put protections into the Constitution is that they knew all about human nature. They knew that some people would serve the people they represent, but that others would be overcome with the power. In a democracy where everyone does their job by paying attention, understanding issues, staying aware of politicians' actions, and using their voices, the wayward politicians, those who lose their way, wouldn't be a problem. Once people recognize that an official is not working for the common good, they could remove them from office or not re-elect them. Unfortunately, modern-day constituents aren't paying close attention, and that creates many problems. Wayward politicians like sly foxes put constituent issues at the bottom of the list. They're making it hard for good lawmakers to do the work they were elected to do. They're weakening our democracy and our place on the world stage as a leader. Let's see what the tree of democracy looks like when we add the special interests, lobbies, riders, and darkness. Imagine the trunk is our strong, sturdy government, and the branches represent the three co-equal branches of government. Now we've added the birds to represent the good special interests who look to the tree for support. The pests, however, represent the not-so-good special interests and lobbies who damage the tree. Finally, the moon and the night sky hide the riders. The darkness of the night obstructs vision and the ability to see clearly. When riders are attached to a bill, usually at the last minute, the public doesn't see everything that's happening. Spoiler alert, operating in darkness is never a way to build trust. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. At this point, you're probably thinking, this is seriously complicated and seems impossible to solve. With lobbies, special interests, campaign donations, riders, and some power-hungry politicians, how can the good politicians do the people's work? Good news! We saved a really important concept for the perfect moment, and that moment is here. It's called the free press. Living in a free country, we often take our freedoms for granted. One of democracy's most important freedoms is freedom of the press, conveniently located in the First Amendment. You've probably heard the word amendment many, many times, and if you're like most people, you've probably never given it much thought. A constitutional amendment is actually a correction, a revision, or an improvement to the original Constitution that was approved in 1788. This means that since our founding fathers created this amazing document, it has had some changes. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's a lot of freedoms packed into one amendment. Freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and to petition the government. Having an amendment approved is not an easy process. 2/3 of the House and Senate must approve the proposal, and then 3/4 of the state must approve it. Since 1788, there have been 27 amendments approved, 6 have been disapproved, and thousands that have simply been discussed. So how does the First Amendment help with the pitfalls of democracy? That's easy. Freedom of the press is often referred to as the fourth branch or pillar of government. That comparison is to help people understand it's important. The media plays an important role in delivering information between the government and the people. Without the work of journalists, we would be unable to participate in our democracy. A free press provides people with the information needed to make decisions. In America, the press is not only allowed to report on elected officials, they are expected to protect the public interest. Their work shapes opinions, prompts actions, and serves as the people's watchdog. Why is protecting the freedom of the press so important? The people ensures citizens are aware and informed of issues and actions. The government shines daylight on our elected and appointed officials. It's time to make a change to our tree of democracy. When we protect and value our free press, we remove the darkness and allow daylight to shine down. And much like darkness aids bad behavior, daylight encourages good behavior. As citizens of a free country, we must rely upon a free press to share information and monitor the government. The information provided is the only way we, as voters and future voters, can participate and cast smart votes. Hot topics surrounding the press, 24-hour news cycles. When the first colonial newspaper was printed in 1690, the colonists were excited. The British governor, however, was not excited. There was a reason that all books and printed materials needed to have his permission. Those in power wanted total control of the information that the people could access. With no television or radio, newspapers were seen as a form of disobedience. The best way for the government to control the people was to control the information. Of course, after the Revolution, that all changed, and the free press became a necessary tool for citizens. But only in recent years have we had so much news. Even in the 1970s, there were limited opportunities to receive the news of the day. With very few television stations and no internet, most people relied on the evening news and daily newspapers. As technology exploded, the volume of news also exploded. Suddenly, there were hundreds of television stations, satellite radio stations, and the internet. With the advancements in printing, printed media also exploded with more publications coming out more frequently. Blogs, which didn't exist before in the 1980s, have become the main source of news for many people, even though many blogs are opinions. Today, news cycles run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This constant bombardment of news has become a double-edged sword. On one edge of the sword, it provides lots of opportunities for people to be informed. If you miss the evening news, you can turn to a news channel any time of day or night, or simply look online. On the other side of the sword, many people believe we now have too much news, and rather than stay informed, people often tune it out. In addition, the nonstop news cycle and fierce competition means networks and news organizations must constantly search for news and exciting ways to present it. The role of a free press and the honor and integrity of journalism require objective coverage. This means the journalists and reporters should only report facts. A real journalist never lets the reader or viewer know their true feelings. A journalist's goal is to provide you with the facts and information. Commenters, on the other hand, are not even journalists, and many do not follow the same journalistic standards. They are simply providing their own interpretation and opinions. A commentator's goal is to shape and influence your opinion by using their opinions. Where did you hear that? Today, to fill the time and space, many organizations use opinion shows and writers in addition to news. It's up to the viewer or reader to know the difference, as well as the source of the information. It's also smart to know about any connections an organization has with other groups or organizations. Some groups disguise their opinions as facts to influence how people think. Suppose you're reading an article online and it supports the fact that doors should be ovals instead of rectangles. The article may present really strong reasons as to why ovals would make better doors. But wait, before you become convinced, do some digging. Who wrote the article? Who published it? Your research might uncover that the publisher of the article is the XYZ News Company. A little more digging might show that the company that owns XYZ News is, you guessed it, the Oval Door Company. Ah, that was not an objective piece of journalism. Instead, it's an advertisement disguised as journalism. The bad news, they don't tell you they're trying to trick you. The good news, it only takes a tiny amount of digging to see if it's journalism. The ironic thing is that they call this a communication age, and it is. The problem is there's too much useless, incorrect, and trivial communication clogging up the airwaves and giving people information fatigue. Chapter 4. Be an amazing citizen. That may sound easy, but it takes effort. Historically, Americans have had an amazing zest for liberty and freedom and have sacrificed a great deal to protect it. But it's almost as if, once the revolution ended, interest faded. Why are so many people uninterested and uninformed? Why do so many Americans, who enjoy more freedoms than any country on the planet, take those freedoms for granted? With so many dictatorships in the world, why do so many Americans fail to exercise their hard-fought right to vote on Election Day and beyond? Maybe people tune out because there are so many levels of government and paying close attention could feel like a full-time job. Maybe it's because the not-so-decent politicians make things purposely complicated in hopes that people will get frustrated and tune out. Maybe it's because voters watch politicians show up at diners, shake hands, and kiss babies before the election. Everywhere you turn, they're there. But once they get elected, you can barely get an intern to return an email. They're all valid reasons. There are a lot of governments to monitor. Things are very complicated. And people have been disappointed by their elected officials so often that they have become soured. People often suggest that we change how government operates. They say we should do things like stop letting lobbyists and special interests donate so much money to candidates, because it's like they're buying the votes they would like. Others say we should limit the length of the campaign season. A super long season requires more money, and voters get campaign fatigue. This means they get so tired of seeing signs and watching commercials that they don't pay attention. Some people think lawmakers should have the same type of term limit as the president, 2 terms. So why don't these things happen? Think about it. The people who would need to vote for these things, lawmakers, are the exact people who benefit from them. We cannot expect people who will do almost anything to get elected, and then, if they get elected, spend a great deal of their term planning to get reelected to make these kind of changes. Remember these words we mentioned before, campaign finance reform? Well, it's hard to believe this situation will somehow correct itself, especially after the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. Not sure what that is? Keep reading. There have been and still are definite limits as to how much a person, a group, or a company can donate directly to a candidate's campaign. There are also things called political action committees, or PACs. These are groups that are not part of the campaign, yet they support a candidate or an issue. Once upon a time, there were limits on exactly how much money individuals and groups could donate, as well as how they could use that money. But for decades there was a debate as to whether or not campaign contributions were a form of free speech. Remember free speech from the First Amendment? The Citizens United PAC took the case to the United States Supreme Court, or SCOTUS, and argued that their First Amendment rights were being violated. In a 5-4 decision, the court agreed. The decision stated that PACs must be independent of the campaign, and communication between the two is illegal, but PACs could raise and spend as much money as they like. They could run ads and create commercials which influence how people think. Many people oppose the decision because instead of limiting the amount of money spent during campaigns, it removed the limits that could be spent if the money goes to a PAC. So you're probably thinking, wow, this is hopeless. The people who need to make the changes are the lawmakers, but they benefit from keeping things the same. Why on earth would they vote against things that help them stay in office? It's like telling a kid who has no bedtime to give himself a bedtime. We all know that that probably won't happen. What do? Remember that equation we discussed earlier? 330 million is greater than 545. And remember the tree of democracy? Not the first one, and not the one with moonlight, but the one with the sunlight of the free press? That tree reminds us that we must protect the sunlight provided by the First Amendment, but that's not enough. Our younger generation must become Generation Lead and must be ready and willing to lead the way, correcting mistakes of past generations. You can do it. Never before has a generation had as much access to real-time information. Never before has a generation had such a unique opportunity to understand global issues. But never before has a generation had so much distractions. Yup, that's right. In the 1970s and the 1980s, kids were still using encyclopedias to find information. The amount of information in an encyclopedia was very limited. There was much less general knowledge about other countries and things that were going on in the world. And with a dozen or so television stations, no video games, no cell phones, no iPods or tablets, and no internet, there were fewer distractions. Today's kids have what was once unimaginable access to information, but also the distractions of social media, games, thousands of channels, and nonstop communication. So how does this generation train a government? That's easy. Our founding fathers provided the tools to get the job done. Just approach it one step at a time. What if we don't change at all and something magical just happens? Chapter 5. How to train your government. Make a decision. That's right. Step 1 is to make a decision that you want to train your government. They often say that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. This is where you have to decide if you want to be a part of the solution, knowing it won't always be easy. This is where you have to summon your inner Paul Revere, your inner Susan B. Anthony, your inner Martin Luther King, and your inner Cesar Chavez. If you don't know who some of these folks are, use one of your devices and Google their names. That's right, close the games and social media apps and read about the lives of some people who just may inspire you. Let those smart devices make you even smarter. Take small steps. Once you make the decision to train your government, don't get carried away. Start with very small steps. Remember, this is a change, and change isn't always easy. Think about every adult who shared a New Year's resolution with you. Maybe they declared they would start a diet and exercise every day. Maybe they declared they would read 5 new books every month. Maybe they declared they would drink more water. If you paid attention, you may have noticed a strong effort in the beginning. Unfortunately, when it comes to change, most people can't maintain that level of effort. They become disappointed and eventually quit. Don't try to sprint through a marathon. The goal is for a lifelong change. Learn from others' mistakes and start with very small steps. Take strategic steps. Small steps are important, but how do you know what is just as important? Strategic steps. After you have decided to be part of the solution, think long and hard about the best way to start. Maybe you will simply watch the news or read a few newspaper articles each day. Maybe you will Google an issue that interests you and, using numerous websites, educate yourself and try to understand all sides. Maybe you'll talk to a variety of adults. Keep in mind, most people have a definite point of view, so their information will come from that perspective. It's best to find people from all points of view. Becoming informed can be easy or as hard as you make it. The old expression, work smarter, not harder, applies here. This is not the time to count on luck. Take advantage of the internet and your devices to understand issues. Stop by a convenience store and pick up a newspaper. A lot of journalists go to a lot of trouble to bring you the information you need to stay informed. Plus, there's something very powerful about holding that newspaper in your hands. Consider the source. Whether you get your information from your sweet old granny, a newspaper, or a radio talk show, know the source. There is often a very obvious bias, a feeling for or against an issue, so be observant. When consuming news, be aware of the source and the source's point of view. Avoid the headlines. Headlines are designed to grab your attention, and they often exaggerate or mislead to get you to read the story. Don't be a headliner. Don't be that person who reads a headline or watches the first 20 seconds of a news show and then repeats part of a story and makes up the rest. Remember, technology makes it easy to be fooled, but it's just as easy to find the truth if you really look. Break the cardinal rule. My grandfather once told me about the cardinal rule. You may never have heard of this, but he said many people live by this rule. Never discuss politics and religion. He said the reason is that people feel so strongly about their political points of view and their religion that it can only lead to arguments. We all agree that we disagree with this rule. Most wars and conflicts begin with differences in religion and politics. The cardinal rule shouldn't be, don't discuss religion and politics. It should be, don't be disrespectful when discussing religion and politics. But discuss, discuss, discuss. Let's face it, just knowing the facts and information isn't enough. Appreciating that other people have different points of view and understanding why they feel that way they do won't just make you a better citizen, it will make you a better person. Remember, knowledge is power, and in this global community, the more you know, the better. Just keep it respectful. Take positions, not selfies. Okay, you might want to have a seat for this one. By this point, you should have a position, or at least some thoughts on various issues. If you'll feel passionately about a topic, know your topic inside and out, and then take a position. But here's the dreaded fine print. As you mature, you enjoy more experiences. As you meet more people, you learn more. Something unexpected may happen. Your positions may change. Yup, what you believe today may change tomorrow. That's okay, as long as you always base your positions on facts and not headlines or sketchy sources. This is also why it's important to be able to defend a position respectfully, but to never look down on others. You never know what the future holds, so don't paint yourself into a corner. If, however, you don't know enough about a topic, it's not only acceptable, but it's wise to say you don't know enough to take a position. What isn't wise is to rely on headlines or conversations with others without fact-checking the information. Party time. So you live in a democracy that is generally considered a two-party system, and those two parties are the Democrats and the Republicans. You should know that there are other parties too, even though you have never heard of them. Ironically, the most significant one isn't even a party. It's simply called being an independent. As an independent voter, you vote for candidates and issues instead of every candidate who represents your party. Each party, whether it's one of the major two or one of the many smaller parties, has a platform which showcases their beliefs. You don't have to commit to a party because it's the party your family supports, and you don't have to commit because everyone else does. What you have to do is to educate yourself. Before you pick a party, do your homework. Some parties are still affiliated with ideals they used to support, but no longer actually support. And yes, that's super easy to check. Some parties have evolved and made changes that even members of the party don't know about. Some elected party members' votes don't reflect the platform of the party, also super easy to check. As you learn about each party, you may find that your ideas line up pretty close with one party. But be prepared. You may also find that some of your ideas line up with one party, while some other line up with another party. That's okay, and basically how independent voters were born. They don't strictly vote for a party, but for candidates and their positions on issues. Some are independents who lean toward a party, but they aren't locked in. Just remember, you have options.